I wasn't supposed to be there that late. The light from the garage had been off for hours, but the radio was still humming quietly from inside. The air smelled of oil and metal, the kind that stays in your skin no matter how much you scrub. I was trying to fix a stubborn carburetor, mostly to keep my hands busy. It had been one of those days where silence felt too heavy. Then her car pulled in, headlights slicing through the dim yard, stopping right at the edge of the light. Maya stepped out like she always did, unhurried, collected, her hair pinned up, but never perfectly, a few strands brushing her face. She had that calm that made everyone else look like they were trying too hard. Even in an oversized sweatshirt and jeans, she carried herself like someone who didn't need to prove she belonged. "Still working?" she asked, her voice soft but dry at the edges, like she already knew the answer. "Trying to," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "It's not listening tonight." She laughed, low and throaty, the kind that hits you before you know why. "Machines are like people," she said, walking closer. "Push too hard, they stop cooperating." I should have laughed back. Instead, I just looked at her, maybe for a beat too long. The fluorescent light above her flickered, catching the silver in her hair, the faint tiredness beneath her eyes. She didn't look perfect. She looked lived in, and I couldn't figure out why that felt magnetic. "Hand me that wrench," she said suddenly, leaning beside me. Her shoulder brushed mine, not intentionally, I think, but enough to make my pulse trip. "You sure you know what you're doing?" I tried to joke. "I used to fix my dad's bike when I was your age," she said, smirking. "I've done worse things than loosen a bolt." Her fingers were steady when mine weren't. She leaned over the engine, and for a second, I just watched her. How careful she was, how she squinted at the smallest detail. The shop was quiet except for the faint tick of cooling metal and the hum of the old radio. We got the part loose after a few tries. She looked at me, grease on her cheek, and grinned. "There. You just needed a woman's touch," she said. I don't remember what I said back, probably something lame, because my brain had gone static. The laugh that followed between us wasn't big or loud, just close. Too close. She looked at me then. Really looked, the way someone does when they suddenly realize the air has changed. Her smile faded just slightly, like she was aware of it too. And then it happened. Not a kiss, not yet. Just this moment where her laughter stopped and our faces were inches apart, and I could feel the warmth of her breath. The kind of pause that makes you forget how to stand naturally. She was the one who stepped back first, brushing her hands on her jeans, pretending to look for her keys. "I should go," she said lightly, like it meant nothing. "Yeah," I murmured. "Sure." But even as her taillights disappeared into the dark, the sound of her laugh lingered, that soft curve in her voice right before it faded. And I swear, it felt like she'd taken something with her, something I didn't realize I'd offered. That night, I caught myself smiling at nothing. And when I noticed my lips had stopped where hers might have been, I couldn't tell if the ache in my chest was confusion or the start of something I shouldn't want. It had been a week since that night in the garage, but the memory kept replaying. Her laugh, the way it stopped too suddenly, the air that shifted right after. Now, she was back, standing by the front counter of the workshop, talking with someone on the phone. I wasn't supposed to listen, but her voice had that mix of warmth and restraint that made every word feel private. "No, it's fine. I'll handle it myself," she said quietly, pressing her fingers to her forehead. Her other hand was wrapped around a travel mug. The steam had long faded, but she held it like she needed the warmth anyway. When she noticed me, she smiled, small, professional, polite. It was different from before. The kind of smile meant to keep a line where one had almost vanished. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Car giving you trouble again?" "Just an oil change this time," she replied, slipping her phone into her bag. Nothing dramatic, but her eyes looked heavier than her voice sounded. While she waited, she followed me into the back of the shop. The air was thick with that metallic scent again, but the afternoon light slanted through the high windows, soft and forgiving. Dust floated in it like lazy thoughts. She stood with her arms crossed, watching me work. Every so often, she'd say something small, half jokes, half distractions. "You always this quiet when you work?" she asked. "Only when someone's watching," I said, smiling. That earned a faint laugh, one she seemed almost surprised to give. For a moment, I saw the woman from that night again, the one who leaned too close over the engine, who forgot to pull away fast enough. But it passed just as quickly. Her expression shifted, thoughtful, almost cautious. "You remind me of my brother," she said suddenly. That hit harder than it should have. Yeah. He used to focus like that, too serious for his own good. She looked away as she said it, her fingers brushing a streak of grease on the counter, like she needed something to do with her hands. It wasn't what she said. It was how her voice softened at the end, how her shoulders lowered for the first time all day. She looked tired. Not the kind that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from holding things in too long. I wanted to say something light enough to keep her here a bit longer, but words didn't come. Instead, I passed her the freshly wiped dipstick and said, "You're good to go." She took it, our fingers brushing briefly. A small thing. But her breath caught for just a second, barely audible. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, but quieter. "You're getting better at this." She started to leave, but stopped near the doorway, glancing back. Her lips parted like she might say something more, then closed again. That pause hung between us, delicate and electric, before she pushed the door open and walked out into the fading light. I watched her go, the sound of her footsteps fading into the soft hum of the street. And for the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd left something unsaid, something I'd almost heard. If I'd only dared to ask, it started raining before she even knocked. The kind of slow, steady rain that soaks everything in silence. I'd just closed the shop early, power flickering, thunder muttering in the distance. When her car rolled in, headlights dim through the mist. She didn't call first. She never did. When she stepped out, the umbrella barely covered her shoulders. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and her jacket was dotted with rain. She looked more like someone escaping a place than driving from one. "Sorry," she said, half laughing, half breathless. "The wipers quit on me halfway here." I tried to smile, but my pulse already knew what my head didn't want to admit. "You could have called. I'd have come to you." "Yeah," she said softly, "I know." Inside, the power flickered again. I set up a work light on the counter, its yellow glow cutting through the gloom. The rain against the roof filled every silence between us. She watched me fuss with tools I didn't need to touch, leaning on the workbench, arms folded for warmth. Her phone buzzed once. She looked at the screen and turned it face down without a word. "Everything okay?" I asked, too carefully. "It's fine," she said. Then, after a moment, "It's just complicated." Her voice trailed off into the hum of the rain. I didn't push. I just kept working, slower than usual, pretending I needed to stay close to the car's hood. After a while, she came to stand beside me. The space between us shrank. One of those quiet accidents no one admits to. I could smell the faint citrus of her perfume, mixed with the rain on her skin. "You always stay late like this?" she asked. "Only when someone shows up uninvited," I said before I could stop myself. That got a real smile, small but real. She didn't move away. "I didn't mean to," she said, voice low. "I don't mind." It came out quieter than I meant. She turned toward me, and for a second, the light caught her face just right, her eyes uncertain, her lips parted, her breath close enough that I felt it more than heard it. The air thickened, not from the heat, but from everything neither of us had the courage to name. Then her phone buzzed again, louder this time. She stepped back, fumbling to silence it. Her voice came out sharp, defensive. "It's just my ex. He keeps calling about the house." I nodded, though my stomach twisted at the word ex. When she finally met my eyes again, something had changed, like she'd just remembered who she was supposed to be around me. "Thanks for fixing this," she said quickly. "You always know what to do." "Not always," I murmured. She hesitated, the stormlight flickering across her face. For a second, she looked like she might reach out, maybe to touch my arm, maybe to say something she'd regret. But she didn't. Instead, she smiled, a fragile, almost trembling thing, and whispered, "Good night." And as she left, her reflection shimmered across the wet floor like a ghost that hadn't quite decided to disappear. I stood there long after she drove off, the rain hitting the roof harder now, wondering how close we could get before something broke. The storm passed, but something heavier stayed. She hadn't come by in days, which shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. I found myself glancing at the empty space near the counter, the one where she usually leaned when pretending she wasn't staying too long. When she finally showed up again, the morning light was sharp, too honest. She wore a pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and carried a folder like it was armor. "Got your invoice," she said. "Figured I'd drop it off in person." I nodded, wiping grease off my hands that wasn't really there. "You could have emailed." "Yeah, well." Her eyes flicked around the shop before settling on me. "I didn't want to." That landed harder than she probably meant. I motioned toward the stool near the workbench. "You can sit." She did, but only halfway, perched like she was ready to leave if the air turned strange again. It already had. We talked about nothing for a while: weather, bills, noise from the neighbor's dog. But every sentence was laced with something unsaid. Every pause stretched longer than it should. Then, without looking up, she said, "We should stop this." My wrench slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. "Stop what?" Her laugh was small, bitter. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend you don't know what I mean." Her voice trembled, not from anger, but exhaustion. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The quiet filled everything between us. The only sound was the hum of the ceiling fan and her shallow breath. She looked down at her hands, twisting the folder's edge. "You're supposed to be just family. My stepbrother. And I keep coming here like..." She stopped. "Like what?" I asked. Her eyes finally met mine, raw and searching, like I'm looking for something I shouldn't want to find. There it was, the truth neither of us was brave enough to name until now. I took a step closer, then stopped halfway. It wasn't fear holding me back. It was knowing what one more step could destroy. "You think I don't feel it too?" I said quietly. She shook her head, almost smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's exactly why we should stop." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, crowded with things we couldn't touch or say. She looked away first, blinking too fast, like she could wash the moment out of her eyes. "You're not making this easy," she whispered. I wasn't trying to. A small, fragile laugh escaped her, then died. She stood, clutching the folder to her chest. "This isn't fair," she said. "You're too young to understand what it costs." "I understand more than you think." She hesitated at the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other tightening around the folder. For a long time, she didn't move. Then, softly, without turning back, she said, "Then you should know why I can't stay." The door closed behind her, quiet, deliberate, and it felt louder than any storm. I stood there, the echo of her voice sinking into the air, and realized the worst part wasn't that she left. It was that, for the first time, her silence sounded like goodbye. I wasn't expecting her that night. It was late, almost closing. The shop lights were half off, the air thick with the smell of rubber and rain-soaked dust. I'd been replaying our last conversation for days, every word sharper in memory than it had been in the moment. Then I heard her car outside, the sound of her door, soft steps. She didn't knock, just stood there in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, breathing unevenly. Her makeup was smudged, like she hadn't planned to see anyone tonight. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "You already are," I said quietly. Something flickered in her eyes. Not regret exactly, but something close. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it as if the effort of standing had suddenly become too much. "I found something," she murmured, setting her phone on the counter. "In an old box from my mother's house." She opened a photo gallery, a scanned picture. A boy, maybe 10 or 11, standing beside a man with a grin too wide to last. I recognized the setting immediately. The old house, the crooked fence, the sun bleeding through a summer sky. "That's me," I said, frowning. "Yeah," she whispered. "And that's your dad." My breath caught. "You knew him?" She nodded slowly. "Before he married your mom." I was. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I was supposed to be with him once. Before everything got tangled." Her voice broke on the last word. The photo between us suddenly felt heavier than it should have. "I never told anyone," she said. "He left, and I tried to move on. Then your mom showed up in the picture, and I buried it." And now, she stopped, pressing her fingers to her temple. Now I look at you. And sometimes, she shook her head. Sometimes I see the way he used to look at me. It's not fair. To you. Or to me. I couldn't find words. The air felt too thin for them anyway. She looked up then, eyes red, voice trembling but clear. That's why I keep pulling away. You remind me of what I lost, and what I almost became. There wasn't anger in her confession, just exhaustion. A kind of grief that had waited too long to be heard. I stepped closer, carefully, until I was standing right in front of her. I didn't touch her, just stood there, breathing the same air, the silence shaking around us. You could have told me, I said softly. She smiled, weak but real. I didn't want to make you carry my ghosts. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The photos still glowed faintly on her screen, the past caught in pixels. Then, without meaning to, I said, I don't think they're just yours anymore. Her hand trembled slightly, as if she wanted to reach out but couldn't trust herself to. And when she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. Then maybe that's what scares me most. She came by the next evening. No warning, no reason. Just the faint sound of her car outside, headlights stretching across the floor of the shop like a question I didn't know how to answer. I almost pretended not to see her. Almost. She stood in the doorway, no folder, no excuses this time. Just her, hair loose, eyes uncertain, hands empty. The kind of quiet that only comes when both people have run out of ways to hide. Do you ever get tired of fixing things? She asked softly. I looked up from the bench. Not when they're worth fixing. Her lips twitched. Not a smile, not quite sadness either. You sound like him. I didn't ask who she meant. I already knew. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore. It was something else, softer, heavier. Like both of us had finally stopped running from the same truth. She walked closer, slow, hesitant, as though she were approaching something fragile. I keep telling myself this shouldn't mean anything, she said. That we're just two people caught in a story that's already been told. And does that help? I asked. She shook her head, almost laughing. No, not at all. The rain started again, light this time, like the world didn't want to interrupt us but couldn't help it. I reached out, without planning to, and took the rag from her hands. Our fingers brushed, small, unimportant to anyone else, but to me, it felt like the world holding its breath. She didn't pull away, not this time. Instead, she looked at me with that same guarded tenderness I'd seen since the first night, the one that said don't, but please don't stop. I don't know what this is, she whispered. I just know it doesn't feel wrong when I'm here. My throat tightened. Maybe that's enough. We stood there, shoulder to shoulder, neither of us trying to name it. The work light flickered above us, throwing slow-moving shadows against the wall. I could feel her warmth through her sleeve, the slight tremor in her hand that matched mine. She leaned in, just enough that our foreheads touched. A breath, a pause, a surrender without words. No promises, no future plans. Just two people admitting they'd already crossed the line long before this moment. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were wet, though she wasn't crying. This can't last, she said, voice steady now. I know, but I'll remember it, she added quietly. Even when I shouldn't. She smiled, the kind that hurts to see because it's so full of truth, and reached up, brushing a streak of grease from my cheek with her thumb. The smallest gesture, but it felt like goodbye disguised as comfort. Neither of us said another word. We just stood there, the rain softening the night outside, her touch fading but her warmth refusing to leave. And as she walked away, for the first time, I didn't follow, because some moments aren't meant to be kept. It's been months since that night in the garage. Sometimes I still find her hair tie on the counter, the one she left behind without noticing. I should have thrown it away. Instead, it sits next to the spare keys, a small, useless thing that somehow still feels like a heartbeat. She moved out of town not long after. Said it was for work, though we both knew it wasn't just that. She needed air that didn't remind her of what she almost let happen. I didn't try to stop her. That's the strange part about love that never gets named. It doesn't really end. It just changes shape until it fits inside you differently. I still work late some nights. The place looks the same, grease-stained floors, half-broken clock, the same old radio humming the same half-static songs. But the silence isn't as heavy anymore. Maybe because I finally understand it. Maya taught me that not every connection is meant to be lived out loud. Some are meant to wake you up, to show you the parts of yourself you didn't know were still waiting for someone to see them. She once said I reminded her of someone she lost. I used to hate that. But now I think maybe that's what we both were to each other. Mirrors for what we missed, what we feared, what we could have been. If I close my eyes, I can still see her standing in the doorway that last night. Rain behind her, quiet in her voice, something breaking and healing at the same time. There was no kiss, no dramatic ending, no goodbye worth filming. Just a soft breath between us, the kind that says thank you without words. I think that's enough. These days, when someone asks why I stay so late at the shop, I just say I like the quiet. But sometimes, when the rain hits the roof the same way it did that night, I catch myself turning toward the door, not expecting her, just remembering what it felt like when she was there. And weirdly, that memory doesn't hurt anymore. It just lives. Maybe that's what love really is. Not possession, not confession. Just the part of you that stays changed after someone's gone. If you've ever had someone like that, someone who walked into your life, stayed just long enough to rearrange the way you see yourself, you know what I mean. We don't always get to keep them, but we do get to keep the part of ourselves that learned to feel because of them. And if that's you, sitting somewhere right now thinking about the one who left a quiet mark, tell me in the comments what stayed with you. Because for me, it was the way she laughed, right before she stopped. They're meant to stay exactly where they break.